won't ask how y'all are doing because I know everybody's doing great. And it's easy to see how we're doing great when I compare what it was like before I got here. Sometimes seeing day-to-day progress is hard in recovery, but if I can just sit quietly just for a moment and reflect back from whence I came, I'm suddenly filled with a little bit of gratitude, enough to do it one more day. This little table over here looks very familiar and very, well, this whole place looks familiar because I spoke here about 14 years ago. This same podium was here, I'm told, and it's so great to see all these familiar faces that were here that night that I was here. There's no doubt everybody's the same. I mean, it's so great. Recovery works. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that you know I'm joking, that I don't know everybody. But the good news is recovery does work if we work it. And I have found that working recovery is not quite as hard as it was to work that using out there and doing all those things. It takes very little effort to stay here. A couple of things that I want to talk about is I got to thinking about some things that I've heard since I got here. Paradoxes. We've all heard about paradoxes. Surrender to win. I won't try to bore you with any of those old well-heeled ones, but I made up a couple of new ones, and I wanted to talk about those to lead into what I really want to talk about tonight. The first one is going to be there's no middle-of-the-road solution, but the only solution is to stay in the middle of the road. And I think that that's real important, especially for talking to newcomers, because being a newcomer once myself, I recall how passionate I was and how excited about recovery I was in the beginning, and it was the center of my wagon wheel there for a little while. And then I started to relegate recovery to a spoke on the wagon wheel. And what I realized that until I make recovery first and in the center of everything, I'm eventually going to lose everything along the edges anyway. So I think it's important to realize that although the book says there's no middle of the road solution, we all know the only solution is to stay in the middle of the road. The next one that I came up with is a little esoteric, but I will explain it. And when I explain it, it'll make complete sense. It goes, the spiritual life's not a theory, we have to live it. Of course, that's in the book. The spiritual life's not a theory, we have to live it. But you can't live it till you first get the theory. And what I have found is that that's absolutely true. The last part of that, which I came up with a little while back, you can't give the spiritual life a fair hearing, nor can I live the spiritual life until I get the theory. Now, what is the theory of recovery? The theory is going to be the first three steps. And unfortunately, that's where most newcomers reside, right? We come in here, all of a sudden we all become baseball fans because it's 1, 2, 3 and you're out. That's my observation anyway. What do I know? I got here in 87. You know, I've had an opportunity to see all manner and means of malfeasance up in this camp. Now, I've perpetrated most of it. But what the steps have taught me is that I can learn from other people's mistakes as well. Now, what was the paradox that I just shared? The spiritual life's not a theory. You have to live it, but you can't live it till you first get the theory. Now, the 12 and 12 talks about what the theory is. In the four-step reading, it talks about our work up to this far is largely theoretical, meaning the fourth step is the first tangible evidence of our desire to move forward. It says that in the book. So the theory is 1, 2, and 3. And I really have to get the fact of what 1, 2, and 3 is trying to show me. And unless I get that, I can't ever get the benefits of the recovery. I can move on past them real quick and say that I've worked them. But until I really concede to my innermost self what 1, 2, and 3 is trying to tell me, I'm really going to see little need to see what the fourth step has to show me anyway. And what the fourth step ends up having to show me is that drugs and alcohol weren't really my problem anyway. You know, I want to lead into that, but I want to get into what I want to talk about by talking about a little bit of a joke, which is what I've always been trained to do. I want to tell a little funny and lead off into what I'm supposed to talk about here tonight. There's a guy doing his first solo parachute jump. He is, let me throw one more out at you. I'll throw one more out to give y'all something to use in them meetings, because I'm not going to be around to use them, but you can use these things in meetings. A guy around in recovery, he talks about I think this is going to be under the heading of doing my part in recovery. What have we talked about? We've already talked about getting the theory of recovery, 1, 2, and 3, before I can have the spiritual life. We talked about having AA be the center of my wagon wheel, meaning there's no middle-of-the-road solution, but the only solution is staying in the middle of the road. Now I want to talk about a little bit about doing my part in recovery. You know, just because I sit in a meeting is not really the whole story. I think I remember thinking that the miracle of AA or NA or CA was going to rub off by osmosis. You know, but the truth of the matter is that sitting in the middle of a AA meeting is not going to turn me into a recovered member of Alcoholics Anonymous any more than sitting in the middle of a garage is going to turn me into a Toyota. You know? Just because I got a Walther PPK don't make me James Bond, you know? Just because I go to a PTA meeting don't make me a parent. I mean, there's certain steps that I've got to take. And if I'm willing to take those steps in recovery, I can get the benefits. So the real lesson here for me has been I can show up for an hour a day, and that's great. But see, I have 23 other hours of the day out there to practice what I hear. And a lot of times we hear at the end of meetings, I want to talk about a couple of things that were once in the beginning, and I'll show you how things can change over time if we're not cognizant of AA history and how things were supposed to be. We're liable to change them into something that's unrecognizable. One of those things is the very chips that we give out. How many of us have been in a meeting? There they are. How many of us has been in a meeting and somebody starts to give out the chips and say, here's a newcomer chip. It's the first day. You don't even have to be sober. You can be fucked up as a baseball bat to get this. Or some semblance of that shit. Well, the fact of the matter is that the first step, and if you buy it from AA, not these are Walmart ones, but that's okay. It's got 24 hours printed on it. The first chip is supposed to represent 24 hours. People have turned it into a joke now. Oh, you can be high and get it. So this is just a little pet peeve for me, but what do I know? I came from a different time, right? I told you when I got here. But I'm just talking about AA and the respect that must be given to the chips and the things that we represent is important to me. It's not important to everybody. So when I hear these people making a joke and a mockery of the first step by saying, oh, you can be high and get this, it's just one of those things. But see, it started out being you had to have 24 hours to earn the right to get the first one. So from the very beginning, I began to realize that I play a part in my recovery. Another thing is you'll hear in meetings, and I talked about this, about the other 23 hours of the day. How many times have you heard in a meeting where somebody will say at the end of the meeting, 12 tradition, remember, what you heard here and who you saw here, let it stay here when you leave here. We've heard that, haven't we? But that's not how it started out, and that's not what it's meant to be. When Dr. Bob and Bill were still alive, maybe some of you might find this instructional. I certainly do, because I want to stay here. I don't want to be a statistic just passing through. So this kind of stuff I'm talking about actually is important, regardless of whether some people in here think it is or not. So back when Dr. Bob and Bill were around, it was said like this, and it sounds a lot different. But it makes sense, and it makes logical sense, and it really lends credence to the idea about the other 23 hours of the day. The night Dr. Bob died, Bill W. told his story. You could find this online if you're interested. It's online. The night Dr. Bob died, Bill gave a great talk, and at the end of the talk, the guy said, and I had to memorize it so I wouldn't forget it, so I would say it correctly. He said, remember, the 12th tradition is spiritual anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. Please, what you heard here, take it with you. Who you saw here, please leave that knowledge behind. Help us maintain this spiritual legacy. You see how much more sense that makes? Please, what you heard here, take it with you. Who you saw here, please leave that knowledge behind. Help us maintain that spiritual legacy. So see, that makes sense. It never made much sense to me that I could come to a meeting, the 1 hour a day I'm supposed to find something to save my life, and then they tell me, whatever you hear here, just forget it. and go do your best out there. What kind of sense does that make? See, when you think about it like that, who are these jokesters that started changing things around? Who are these jokesters that started saying you could be high and pick up chips? Well, let's go there. Let's talk about chips. I'm talking about some of the things that I believe, having been here before some of you were born. These are some of the things I believe. That's what I'm supposed to be talking about. Some of the things I believe and what I've learned. One of the things I've learned from going to all the fellowship, coming in as a young person, 22 years old, I didn't even go to AA for my first 2 years because there was no young people there. There was only old people. And I said, forget this. I went to NA and CA. But what I have learned is that wherever I go, I must show respect. If I go to NA, I say I'm an addict. I don't ever say I'm an ANDA. That's the thing with the treatment centers in the last 10 or 12 years. You used to never hear that. If I go to AA, I'm an alcoholic. If I go to CA, I'm an addict. I show respect by talking about the text that goes along with that meeting. When I go to NA, I share out of the basic text. I had to learn some things out of that. I don't know it near as good as I know the big book, but I show the kind of respect that it demands. So when I go to NA, I say clean, not sober, and things like that. Maybe some of you have gone to some NA meetings. When I came up, there were NA hardliners that would call you down in the middle of your share if you messed up with one word. One of my first things that ever happened to me in recovery, I had my brand new CA hat on. I was so proud. It was my first piece of recovery apparel. A shirt, a hat, something to do with recovery. And I had my CA hat, and I didn't know any better. I had 60 days. I didn't know shit. Worse off, I didn't even know that I didn't know shit. I got to thinking I knew shit about 90 days. So I walk in there with my CA hat, about 100 people in a huge circle, and there's always a ramrod of the place. Here, it's the gentleman over here, the old-timer that's got the most time of anybody in the room. That night, it was a lady named Thule. And she was the one, if she spoke, it was like E.F. Hutton. Of course, you don't know who that was, but that used to be a commercial when I was a kid. And if E.F. Hutton talked, everybody listened and everybody got quiet. So there we are doing the 20 readings that are in the beginning of an NA meeting. Ha, ha, ha. Who, what, when, where, why, and all that. And it's about 7:30 before you can even get to the meeting. But that's another story for another day. So in the middle of the readings, Thule speaks up and says, hold on a minute, and everybody stops talking. And she points across the way at me. It must have been 30 feet away. That's how big this circle was. And she said, you. And it's so big, I'm looking to the right, looking to the left, knowing for damn sure I ain't 13-step nobody that night, so I'm probably in the clear. I was pretty bad about that early on. Of course, I had no time either, so it didn't make any difference, right? We were all studying the big book together and having a good old time, if you know what I mean. That's what I used to call it. You want to go study the big book, baby? Anyway, it actually did used to work very well, as a matter of fact. Another story for another day. So Thule says, hey, you, and it finally comes to me that she's talking about me. She's talking about me. She's pointing at me. And I'm looking around, I'm going, oh my God, she's talking about me. And she said, what you got on your head? And I said, I didn't even know enough to know I had fucked up. And I said, this is my new CA hat. You're in the wrong place. You need to get the fuck out. So I learned early on that I needed to show respect to where I went. Now, I learned the hard way, but you can bet I learned that night everything I was supposed to do and supposed not to do. And somebody in AA could do the same thing I'm talking about. I've seen him run out and at it because he was showing disrespect. My point is this. What I have learned in recovery, to go everywhere, is to show respect where I go. These are simple concepts that most of us seem to miss because we're such rebels. We want to be such badasses, and we come in meetings with that shit, not showing respect, and we wonder why we have a pocket full of white chips. The sooner I learn about respect, the longer I can stay here. And I have found that I've learned that, and I've been able to stay here. Another thing about the chips, and we're talking about what I learned, and I've moved on into some stuff that I didn't plan on moving into, but I'm started talking about what I believe and what I've learned being around here for a long time. Because the thing that made me reflect on it is because evidently I was standing at this exact spot 14 years ago. So it makes me do a little bit of reflection, right? I was standing right here 14 years ago speaking that night at this place. I had forgotten it. He reminded me it was the same place. And when I got here, sure enough, it's the same place. What I have found is that the chip I have in my pocket, and this is my belief. These are Altoids, by the way, so I hope nobody's triggered. That's a new word these days. Triggered. Let me tell you something about triggered. After you work the steps, there's only one trigger, and that's Roy Rogers' horse, and it's stuffed in Dale Evans' house. Okay? Because once I work the steps, nothing triggers me because alcohol and drugs is not a part of my life anymore. And I don't have to live in fear. Not that I stupidly go back in the crack house to see how my friends are. That's just dumb. But I'm talking about I can go in the convenience store even though it's got a beer cooler and do my business and get out without being consumed by the fear that the grim reaper of alcoholism is going to lop my head off at any moment. Part of the freedom, the new freedom and new happiness that comes from working the steps, sometimes I can miss it. Sometimes it can elude me. But the only way I can spot it is to get rid of old ideas because I can't spot new freedoms with old ideas. I got to get some new ideas. And one of the new ideas that I've gotten since I've been here, because I came in here wanting to play some games with recovery. I'll give you a couple of examples of game players that of course are not here anymore. There was a guy that picked up 5 years at a CA meeting. Everybody clapped. It was a momentous occasion. We all know 5 years sounds like a long time. And you know what? It is. Hell, 30 days still sounds like a long time to me. I will admit this. That's one of the reasons I've been able to stay here. I don't forget where I've come from. So this guy picks up a 5-year chip and everybody claps and it's such a great thing. There was only one problem. There was this pesky little problem that I saw the dude drunk 30 days ago. It's a pesky little problem. And I made sure he understood that it was a problem. So we're outside the meeting and I said, hey man, it's great. You got your 5-year chip. So we shook hands and I said, but maybe you could help me. Weren't you drunk 30 days ago? He said, oh, this is CA. You see what I'm saying? Game player. So he could have him a sobriety date at CA even though he was drunk. I'll tell you another example. I didn't make any of this up, by the way. Some of the shit that goes on in meetings, the tomfoolery, the ballyhoo, the shenanigans, you can't make it up. Only here could some of this stuff happen. This chick picked up 8 years at HA. Except she did it a little different. She picked up every single chip all the way to 8 years. And as trained SEALs, what did we do? Every single chip, there we were. It was unbelievable. I mean, nobody cut her down at all. Said, hey, babe, are we going to go on all night? I mean, can we just get to the end? I mean, how long do you have? 30, 60. And everybody was just doing it because we're trained to do it. So she gets to about 3 years and somebody finally said, how long do you have? Because we began to wonder if this head case was going to pick up every chip in the box. She says, I got 8 years. Okay, time to clap. How did you do it? Oh, I smoked crack. No, you can't make this up. I was a witness to this. I wouldn't have believed it unless I seen it. Okay? So this is what I'm talking about. Now, what does that mean? She's playing games. Now, what point am I making with these funny stories? Funny stories is that the chip is supposed to mean alcohol and all mind-altering chemicals of any form, regardless of where I go, or it means nothing. It's a joke. And believe it or not, look to your right, look to your left, there's people in here that think it's a joke. And they're doing the exact same thing that I've already talked about tonight in this very room. Hate every single word I've said up to this point about that subject. Because they go here and they're doing this, and they go here, they're doing that. And who are you fooling? I'll leave you with it, because there's only one answer. Because in the final analysis, if you want to be here, that's not the way to do it. Because you know as well as I do, the grapevine in recovery is fast as lightning, and you can't hide everything for long. And then it's your ass if you've been fucking around long enough, because they will never let you forget it. Ask me how I know. I'm still being labeled the 13th stepper. If I got half the shit that I'm still attributed to getting, with this many years later, it would have done fell off. Oh, he all the newcomers. Good Lord. I mean, yeah, that was my first 5 years, but good God, how long does it take to live down a ramp around this camp? This outfit holds a grudge, baby. But anyway, it's okay. If one thing I learned from that is that I had to own my part, and the truth of the matter is that on a lot of those situations, I didn't give much thought to other people's feelings. And what I learned after having more than several, I've hurt some feelings, broke some hearts, had mine broke a couple of times. But what I've seen through the damage that I've caused, that I need to consider other people's feelings. And that has kept me out of some after I learned that. Because what I had to realize, can I give this person as much as they're willing to give me? I've learned some things. I've not learned everything. I'm still learning. But these are some of the things that I've learned. And we talked about some of the paradoxes about AA being the center. We talked about doing my part. We talked about not having it rub off by osmosis. We talked about not playing games with the chips and having some integrity about your recovery. That's for me. I'm talking about what I believe. That's what I'm supposed to do. But see, people are uncomfortable, especially right about now, because here I am well into this talk, and I haven't talked about war stories at all. Now reflect back on all the stories you've heard people tell. How often is it 55 minutes of drunk-a-log and war stories, and if you're lucky, they even get into recovery? That's what most speaking meetings are, and that's why I really don't like them. But if I've been around this long and all I got to share is brag to you about how I used to get high, I need to blow my fucking brains out, because I'm not bringing anything to this table. So for a long time now, when I talk, I never talk about war stories. I don't have to. You just have to believe that I've spent over half my life here. I must be here for the right reason. I didn't just say, oh, I think I'll spend the rest of my life in AA with these fine, upstanding people. Right? Look around. So this guy is doing his first solo parachute jump. I'm not talking about this tandem business. I'm talking about he's jumping out on his own. So he jumps out of the airplane, and he's done his training, right? And that's another thing. AA is like training. Like I said, just because I got a Walther PPK, which I just actually bought, by the way, a chrome Walther PPK, just like the one James Bond used. I just bought it. It cost me $800. But just because I got a Walther PPK don't make me James Bond. What do I need to be able to be like James Bond? I got to train. And these steps and some of these things that I've been talking about, talk about the things I need to be trained with in AA. I need to come to a meeting every single day, even though I don't think I need to. I need to come during the good times, because you can bet when I pay that insurance premium for my car, when there's not a scratch on it, I don't like cutting that check. But in the wet-ass hour, when I call that 1-800 number after I've had an accident, I want to be in... What's this? Thank you. I want to be in good hands. And I want AA to come to my aid when I go through a tough time, because I've gone through the training in the good times. Ask anybody that's been in the military. Ask it. My father was in the military. You got to go through that training over and over. You man, I'm sick of doing this shit. Why do they make you do it? Because in the time of need, it comes second nature. And that's what it's all about. So this guy that jumped out of the airplane, he's had his training. He's been told at a certain altitude he pulls his ripcord. See? It's already 8:30. I ain't told no war stories. I hate to disappoint y'all. I ain't going to tell none. But what I hope is that somebody leaves here with something to think about, and somebody leaves here knowing something they didn't know before they got here. So, at the right altitude, he pulls his ripcord. There's only one problem. Nothing happens. But that's okay. His training kicks in. What did it tell him? It told him, okay, don't panic. Cut away the chute and pull your reserve chute. All right, now he pulls that one. Now nothing happens. Homie's in trouble. It's time to get worried. Now, suspend disbelief just for a moment that he's able to pass a dude going the other way, the same speed. The other dude's going the same speed going up. And they stop and they're able to have a small conversation just for a moment. Suspend disbelief just for a moment. And he says, hey man, do you know anything about parachutes? And the dude going the other way says, no man, do you know anything about light and gas stoves? You're saying, well, that's great, Mike. That's cute. I may use it. I may not. But what the fuck does it have to do with what we're here to talk about? I may not know about parachutes and I may not know about gas stoves. But what I'm here to talk about, I do know about. And that is, I'm Michael W. Smith. I'm an alcoholic. Hey, Mike. See, it took me long enough to get there, but I was going to get there. I got digressed a little bit because that's what I'm supposed to say when I start, right? Okay. When people do their talk, most of my observation has been they come with a lot of superfluous, meaningless information about their childhood that has no bearing of what we're doing here. So I'm going to talk about my childhood, a couple of instances that have direct bearing on what we're supposed to talk about. One of them gives the story about how I was dealing with an addictive personality even before I took the first drink. There was these stickers that I used to have when I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. They were called Wacky Pack stickers. There is somebody in here that remembers those. And Wacky Pack stickers was a sticker that would make fun of different products and make it a funny, like Toad laundry detergent, have a picture of a frog on it. And you get all these stickers. And you go and they Tops would sell them. You get 5 or 6 stickers with a piece of bubble gum in it. And it was 5 cents for a pack. And I got 25 cents a week as an allowance. That's what I got as an allowance. So I could get me 5 packs. And at the bottom right corner, no matter what sticker kind you had, whether it was football or hot rods or whatever, at the bottom right-hand corner, you know what was down there. It was the same with all of them. It said 55 of 200. There was a set of them things. And then after that set, the next 6 months or so, they come out with another set. But man, I was absolutely obsessed with having the entire set. I could not stand it. I'd have 20 of one sticker, but I gotta have it. I remember being so obsessed about having the whole set, and I still have those stickers in my toy box downstairs in my house with my first Franklin glove and my little ball bat and my stacks of stickers. As soon as I would get that full set, I would almost be high. I was like, oh, I got the whole set. And I'd lay it out and I'd look at it. And you know what? About a few days later would happen? I got to have another set. So I know I was hooked. I was addicted before I ever took a drink. I had the addictive personality before I ever took a drink. That proves it to me. And what these steps prove to me is that alcohol and drugs and circumstance were not my problem. That's what I thought when I got here. I blamed everybody. It was just bad luck. But what the steps talk about, when I moved from the theory to the practice, remember, 1, 2, and 3 is the theory. But then 4 was tangible. When I start going into 4 and 5, I start realizing that there was things about me, these character defects that we talk about, fear, selfish, self-seeking, and dishonesty, that led me to believe things weren't true, that led me to have resentments against people, unwarranted. I would tell myself a situation went down a certain way. When I lied to myself, it did not go down that way. And I would tell myself that story over and over again. And every time I would tell myself that story, I got more blameless and they got more son of a bitch. Joe and Charlie talk about every morning waking up pushing that resentment replay machine. And I would push that machine. And the book talks about we squander the hours that may have been worthwhile when we do things like that. So I realized that I was dealing with an addictive personality, and drugs and alcohol probably kept me from killing myself before I could get to the real solution. Another thing from my childhood is going to be the fact that I was an only child. And you say, well, how does that have anything to do with the book? Well, if you've read Dr. Bob's story, Dr. Bob's nightmare, in his story, he said that he was an only child. And it engendered the selfishness that played such an integral part in bringing about my alcoholism. And what that means is I was an only child, just like Dr. Bob, and the world did revolve around me. I had no brothers and sisters to share my stuff with. My parents were at my beck and call, and I was a great little manipulator. There's one instance that I remember, though, that even makes me feel bad, amongst others. We lived in a trailer when I was a kid, and there was this dirt road that I had to walk down. It must have been 50 yards. Being the spoiled little brat that I was, I wanted my mom to actually take me in the car down the dirt road to catch the bus. She was doing something for my dad back when the decision in the household was made by the dad, and what he said went. But I made her feel like shit about not getting in that car. And I remember it's like it was yesterday, and it was not yesterday. She said, honey, sometimes you make me so angry. You know, working these steps helped me reflect on the simple truth that the lie I told myself all those years that my addiction only affected me, it let me see some truths that make me shudder to think I may have been observed. And there's a couple of others I won't go into. But the point is clear, is that those two instances from my childhood have a direct bearing. Now, why does the only child have a bearing? Because how many of us have taken something, well, I'm an only child, I come by my selfishness honestly, so y'all just have to deal with it. Principles for personalities. We're so clever. We will turn sayings that started out meaning the exact opposite and go and turn principles over personalities to be, you have to put up with my bullshit because the book says principles before personalities. That's how cunning we are. Of course, those people don't stay around long. You know, one instance from my childhood, and this is one that I know a lot of people in recovery, especially if you didn't grow up with a silver spoon hanging out of your ass, which I didn't. I got a quarter a week allowance. My parents were not easy people. My dad was military. There was no bullshit. He was a hard person. But he's one of the greatest men I've ever known. But he said something that shaped the course of my life one night when I was 8 years old. I was in the garage, and he always made me go down there and help him fix things. He fixed Phantom jets in Vietnam, so he was not afraid to work on things. And he always made me stand right there and watch him fix things, so I would be not afraid to fix things when I grew up. And whatever it was, he had his tools out there, and I don't know if I knocked something over. I don't know what I did to this day. It really doesn't matter. But whatever it does, he said something that rang, and it sunk down in the depths of my bones. And I spent the rest of my life trying to prove it wrong. He said, I knocked the thing over. He said, son, do you know that you fuck up more than you fix? And when he said it, I didn't even register, but I got to thinking about it. day after day, week after week. And I got to thinking about what he said. And I wondered if it was true. Did I fuck up more than I fix? What's the use? You fuck up more than you fix. And I look back on my life and some of the things that I tried to do in life to overachieve. It was all to prove that wrong. Because what my dad said at that young age went down into the depths of my soul and made me doubt my self-worth in total. But he didn't mean it that way. I know he didn't. He loves me. He's been the greatest man. He's told me some of the greatest things. And I've never brought that up to him since I've been in recovery. Because you know how we like to go back and tell him. But you know what? The good has far outweighed the bad. And I think it would be so petty for me to go back to my dad and say, Dad, I've worked the steps. And let me tell you what you did. I would deserve him to punch me right in the mouth. But what that statement did do is it made me try so hard, and it's probably one of the reasons that I went to school and spent 20 years in academia and became a lawyer in recovery and became a CPA in recovery. And now I have 2 masters, 2 doctorates, and a postdoctoral degree in tax law just to prove my father wrong. I don't know if I'll ever hear from him that I don't fuck up more than I fix. But what I will share with you is the same thing that I heard. Some of you may have a parent that said something. That's why I'm telling the story. Some of you may have a parent that said something. I talked to a lady that had 10 years of therapy. She spent 10 years of therapy at $100 an hour. And she shared with me what she learned in a decade of therapy. All that money, all that time. And she told me what the steps had already shown me. But I memorized what she said, and I'm going to share it with you. She said, someday I may have to realize I may not ever get what I think I deserve from my parents. Someday I may have to realize I may not ever get what I think I deserve from my parents. Now the steps showed me this truth. The steps showed me calm, rational reflection that one statement from a man over 40 years ago does not define who I am. The reflection has shown me to look past that one statement and not hate this man, but to love him for all that he's done for me. Now I'm talking about my dad. I know there's some fucking sorry-ass dads out there. I've been around here most of my life. I've heard some stories that my compassion goes out to people. But I just wanted to share with you how a statement can have such weight as a youngster. And these steps have proven to me that the lie that I'm a broken addict or alcoholic and everything I do touches turns to shit and everything I think is wrong is a lie. Because when I got here, I thought to admit that I was an alcoholic was the worst thing in the world. I thought it meant everything I touched was wrong. I couldn't do shit. I was admitting brokenness ad infinitum. But as I've already shared, I went back to school after having failed out and became, in my mind, achieved a few things. I have proved within myself that lie was in fact a lie. Because we're not supposed to go to law school 5 nights a week for 3 years and make the dean's list every semester and pass the bar on the first time. That's for those other people. That's not for us. And I'm talking about 5 nights a week and not missing a meeting. Because I remembered what had to be the center of my wagon wheel. I was studying my flashcards in fucking meetings. I have witnesses that are still around. Not many. That was back in 2008, so you do the math. The numbers dwindle over time that are there at this time. Look around next year, there won't be, you do the math, 5 in 100 maybe. I want to share with you some of the great news, man. some of the greatest news that I've ever come across in recovery. Because everybody is sitting here thinking the same thing that I thought when I got here is, do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes to do this thing? I mean, just to stay clean, let alone go do something with my life. Now, let's be clear. If I'm here 20 years later and all I'm telling you is that I stayed sober today and that's all I got, or I'm sober today and I'm homeless and I'm this and that and all I got is there's something wrong with me. If I have not progressed at all in 20 years, I need to never share in another fucking meeting because I'm not doing nothing but killing people. I'm talking about what I believe. I don't know anybody. I ain't talking at anybody. Believe me, because I'm the king of sharpshooting. I know how to sharpshoot somebody in a meeting that's been fucking up. But I don't know none of y'all, see? So I don't know who to sharpshoot up in this camp. I'm just telling you what I believe. So the question is, do I have what it takes? And there's an old comedian. You notice, here it is. And I ain't told not one war story. But I've told some stuff that I think I've seen some people, being a pro at this. There's been some people that are listening. Communication has taken place. And it's not me talking down to anybody either. Do I have what it takes? There's an old comedian. And some of you are old enough to remember Richard Pryor. I actually have plastic records with Richard Pryor on it, back when they had actual plastic records. I still got them. And I used to listen to Richard Pryor, and one of his skits is perfect for what we're talking about. And what are we talking about? A newcomer asking, do I have what it takes? And I'm going to prove to you that you have what it takes. I'm going to prove to you that you have more than what it takes. But it's going to take Richard Pryor as the vehicle to get there. Because you're not going to just believe me saying it. Lofty platitudes are great. But I got to have something to sink my teeth into. Some reality that ties to my experience. That's the only way I'm going to believe something. That's why when we go to treatment and we have some counselor that ain't never had no addiction problem and all they do is got book knowledge and they're trying to talk to us in their office, we ain't listening because we know they ain't been there. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I've seen those people. I was in treatment. The judgment that you could see hiding right behind their eyes, which fostered that idea of my brokenness. That's why this works. Because people who have been there, that may be a little farther along on the path in time and quality and quantity, tells me lessons that they've learned. And they hope that I listen. Richard Pryor's up on stage. He always was up there by himself. He'd have a stool and a microphone. And he'd play these skits, and he'd play both sides of the skit. And this time he was playing a guy that's trying to get a job. This is an Altoid, by the way. What did I say about trigger? The reason I hold it in my lips, I will tell you a little sad story. You will like this. You notice that I hold it in my lip for a minute. That is because I have had to do that over the years to show that it's not a pill. And then I have to hold it in my teeth for a second so y'all will see it. And then I have to put it in my mouth. Why do you do that, Mike? Because the first time I ever put one in my mouth, the first night I started using these, why? This will show you how much power you ladies have. Some girl told me I had bad breath. I've had these in my pocket for a quarter fucking century. That's how much power you ladies have. I just want to let you know. You already know that, but no, whatever. Okay. So somebody came up after the meeting and said, "You triggered me. You shouldn't take pills in the meeting." And I showed them my Altoid and showed them, So that ever since then I put it in my lip and then I held it in my teeth and then I used it because that's what I had to do. Because there was always some trigger-happy soul out there in the gallery. Who knows who they are? But anyway, I digress. Where was I at? Who's listening? Thank you. So y'all got a test who was listening. Boom, she had it. I always come back. If I ever go away, I always come back. I don't forget where I'm at. I've done this too long. So he's up on stage. He's playing a guy that's trying to get a job. He's playing the guy behind the desk looking at the resume. Mr. Pryor, we don't know if you're responsible. We don't know if you have what it takes. We don't know if you're dependable. In his best drunken voice, he says, "What do you mean I'm not dependable? For the last 5 years, I've had a $500 a day drug habit. I ain't missed a payment." What? You see? Now, what is he saying? What is he saying? Before I knew anything about recovery, what was he saying? Something I desperately need to know. And he was saying that the energy that it took to do what he needed to do was available to him, and he was using it on a daily basis to not miss that payment. Now, we all know it ain't actually about missing a payment. We are not known for making payments. Okay, let's just go. But the concept is clear. He did what he had to do to get his stuff. The reservoir of energy was there when he was motivated to use it. So what was the question that the Richard Pryor story was supposed to answer? Do I have what it takes? And the answer is hell yes. Because that same reservoir of energy that I use to not miss that payment is available to me when I get here. Not dragged down by dope or alcohol. Dr. Bob said it best in his story. He said, if I put half the zeal, that was the word back then. You can call it energy. You can call it what you want. He said, if you put half the zeal, you can go look it up in his story. I don't have to make this up. I know the big book like the back of my hand. Damn near know what's on every single page. I have not bored you with quoting pages and page numbers. I could rattle your cage and have your head spinning around like that bitch from The Exorcist. But I didn't do that because I know what crowd I'm talking to. This is not a room full of old-timers, okay? I have respect and I know who I'm talking to. I have to speak to you differently than a room full of dudes with 30 years. He talks about it in his story. If you put half the zeal into this thing as that I put into getting my alcohol, my Heavenly Father will not let me down. And that is exactly the story that I'm trying to tell, in part, to any newcomer that may be here that's asking the same question that I had. Do I have what it takes, with or without the Father that said you fuck up more than you fix? Because I can have that voice without my dad saying that shit. You throw in my dad saying that shit, I'm damn near sunk. But the effort that I've done to stay here. Who's got a... oh, good. I'm going to end with this because this is also a question that newcomers always have. And I'm not speaking down to anybody because I alluded to the fact that there's some newcomers in this room. You know, that's not me talking down. Think about how long I've been around. I'm not talking down. I'm just saying I'm trying to impart some things to you that I've learned. The question that I remember asking when I got here, and I really don't need to do this book like this, but I want you to see that this is coming out of the book, because a lot of times when I start rattling on, you know, it's different than seeing somebody read out of the book. All right, the question that I always had, let me make sure what I got. Okay. I will tell you one universal truth. If I go 1 minute past 9, let's look at this truth right here. I didn't stop drinking at 9. Oh, it's 9. Let's stop drinking. Oh, you can just have the rest of that crap rock. It's 9. We got to go. Let me tell you something. It's okay. It's okay. Because there ain't no better place to be than right here and right now. If you want to stay here. I'm going to share with you a question I always ask myself, and this is what I share when I'm in a treatment center, because this is the number one question. Because they're sitting in there with bandages still on their hands like a Q-tip. You know, they're still toe up from the blow up. I mean, it was 2 or 3 days ago that they just rolled up in there. And they're going, how the hell did I get here again? I had every reason not to do it. She's leaving me. They're going to take all the kids. They're going to lock my dumb ass all the way up, deservedly so this time. Why did I use again? And then some smart-ass old-timer says something about, well, the doctor's opinion says we drink essentially for the effect produced by alcohol. Well, man, let me tell you something. It better be a little more than that simple word effect. Because the wreck that I'm able to cause in my life and others, it better be a little bit deeper than the word effect. And I'm here to share with you that it in fact is. It is so much deeper than that, and I'm going to share with you right out of the book in a way you may not have ever heard before. And I want you to go to page, it's not 183, what am I talking about? It's 83. I want you to go home tonight if you have your book, and I want you to reread it through this special way and ask yourself, is it in fact why? I kept going back, and the answer will be, hell yes. And the other question will be on the other side of that, how imperative is it to work these steps? Because I'm doomed to do it again, regardless of what I think, which is what the first step is. I have to get that I'm going to use and drink again no matter how bad I want to quit this time. That is the first step. And if I really believe that, step 2 becomes easy. Step 3 is me standing on the dock of the train station with my little baggage, and the train pulls up, and I make a decision to get on, and I get on this train called recovery, and it pulls away from the station. And every day what I do in recovery keeps that train moving. And I move out of the theory part of the recovery and get into the real part. The answer to the question, why do I keep doing what I do? And I'm going to read this. Remember page 83. Go home and read it for yourself. There may be about 3 or 4 people that will actually do that tonight. You will be better for it. This is what alcohol and drugs used to give me. This is why I always went back. And it's much deeper than the word effect. When I took a drink of alcohol, I knew a new freedom and a new happiness. When I got loaded, I didn't regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. When I got high, I comprehended the word serenity and I knew peace. When I got loaded, no matter how far down the scale I had gone, I could see how my experience could benefit others. When I got drunk, my whole attitude and outlook upon life changed. Fear and people and of economic insecurity left me. When I got high, I intuitively knew how to handle situations that used to baffle me. I suddenly realized that drugs and alcohol was doing for me what I could not do for myself. That is why. That is the effect. And there's not one damn thing wrong with me because I want to have less fear or feel like somebody or have a new outlook just for a minute. There's nothing wrong with me because I want those things. Where I fell short is I was getting them from the wrong place, even after I had evidence to the contrary that it was even working toward the end. And I kept going back because my mind wants me to remember what alcohol and drugs did for me, not what it did to me. I heard Grace Slick say that when I got out of treatment in 1987. She said it on the television. She said that alcohol worked for her for a while, and then it started working on her. Grace Slick, she was the Jefferson Airplane? Who the fuck ever Grace Slick was? Some spandex wearing pre-Pat Benatar chick, whoever. But I remember her saying that, and that is the truth. So what is the lesson as we draw to a close here? Time is running out on us, but time has just begun. I may not ever see y'all again, right? If I come back in 14 years and stand right here, you can bet your ass your cowboy hat. You can bet your ass your cat, your ass your cowboy hat that I definitely won't see a lot of these people again. So what's the lesson from this? Is that if I used to get this from alcohol and drugs, and if I don't do something different, my mind is going to remember, like hardwired like a computer. When I push that button, it goes through a certain sequence. and it reboots, and that Windows logo comes up every time like clockwork. It's so dependable. My mind remembers where it used to get them promises. And it may postpone that shit for 60 days while I'm getting that slip signed. It may postpone it 60 days till I get my license back. It may postpone it 60 days till she's talking to me again, or I get my job back. But if I don't put something else in place of those promises, like the real ones from the steps, my mind will say, hey, buddy, it's about time to go get that Windows logo again, isn't it, buddy? And I will listen, and I will walk like some kind of zombie, not even knowing how I got there. Because nobody ever explained it to me just like what I just did. So if I'm new and I haven't worked the steps, and I'm still in 1, 2, and 3, a baseball player, if I'm still in the theory part of this, and it said, oh, I'll get to that hard steps later, easy does it, I'll give myself a break, I didn't get here, and that's the worst thing you can tell an addict. He's already been giving himself a break. Don't tell him easy does it, buddy. Give yourself a break. It's okay, baby. No, it's not okay. I'm here to report. It's so far from not okay. But the elusive part of this thing is that you come in here and a certain improvement takes place almost instantly. You have a drastic reduction in the number of times you go to jail just by going to meetings. It's unbelievable. You know, you're hanging around, it's new, you're learning what are these 12 steps, and you start trying to practice reciting how it works without looking at it. I mean, all these things. But sooner or later, the new wears off. And those subtle improvements, the instant ones that my disease tells me, oh, things are better, the problem is solved. No, my friend, that's the lie. I haven't even understood the problem yet. And bridging and moving into that next area, and realizing that it's parts of me that was the problem. Realizing that I was dealing with an addictive personality like from my child. Realizing that I may be carrying around baggage like what my dad said. Realizing that I may be buying into lies that my disease told me about what it did for me and making me forget what it did to me. The only way I can see these truths is to shed light on them. The only way I can shed light on them is to have the correct people around me. I need to have accountability partners in my life, not bullshit co-signers. Let me tell you where you find bullshit co-signers. In the next bed at the fucking halfway house. Oh yeah. They'll co-sign anything you have to say because they're just waiting on somebody to say, hey, Kratom's 2 for 15, let's go. And we can go do some Kratom because it don't pick up on the drug test. Now that goes all the way back to the beginning of that talk when I talked about those people playing games within ships, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. If you're doing Kratom or some other kind of bullshit and you're coming up in here trying to sell me that you're clean, you're a disgrace to fucking recovery. Now you can quote me on that. Because this is something that happens to be important to me. This is something worthy of respect. And until I find that respect and started acting accordingly, I'm going to be the guy that's revolving door. The guy that you might as well just order white chips from me instead of from World. That's how many I got in my pocket. I've never been that guy, but I've seen those guys. And it never ends well. So I know I've talked about a lot, and I know there's some people in here, because I'm a pro at reading crowd, there's some people in here that have taken offense to some of the things that I've said. Well, get in line. Can you imagine the meetings I go to, the feathers I ruffle? I've had people try to accost me outside of meetings and start a fight because of the truth I dispense. Because the kind of truth I talk about raises the very devil in people. And what you will find is that the disease resides in people. It is a possession in no small way. People are possessed in here. And I need the steps to give me an exorcism. You think I'm speaking esoterically or crazy? Does the book on 46 and 50 not say that as soon as I follow a few simple rules and do a few simple things, I begin to be possessed by a new sense of power? Does it say that? What is it saying? It's saying, hey, buddy, you were possessed by an old sense of power. You need to get with the program. So I'm not talking about some crazy shit. I'm talking about what the book says, which is what I always do. I just hadn't peppered you with quoting pages and all that because, like I said, it was not going to assist us. But I hope that you've gotten one thing from this talk, is that I feel passionately about what I believe in. I hope that I've said what I said in a manner where you understand that I've been there, and I understand how some people have asked some questions that I once asked, and let me tell you what I've learned. I know I've said some maybe jarring or startling things about the chips and respect for fellowships and things that some people may not like, but that's okay. That's okay. It doesn't mean that what I have said is not 100% true. Because I remember those guys that I used to hate when I got here, and they would say things like that. And I would try to start fights with those old men, or at least get in verbal altercations. I didn't actually try to start a fight in a meeting. I would not recommend that at all. You want to be a disgrace to recovery? Start a fight at a fucking meeting. What kind of low life is that? Oftentimes they're in churches. I mean, I really need to check myself, or I'm liable to wreck myself just like this. Because recovery has taught me one simple thing. And it's something my father told me a long time ago. He said, son, you need to stop being reactive and start being proactive. I was a king at reacting to a problem. Problem, reaction. Drama, reaction. What this program has taught me to do is lift my head up out of the gutter and look ahead and watch where I'm going and act ahead. Think ahead. Watch where I'm going. Because this program, especially on 10 and 84 and 85, it can give you the impression that the total of recovery is about fuck up, fix it. Fuck up, promptly admit you're wrong. You're a fuck up, find out where you're a fuck up, even if you can't see where it's at. Somebody's going to tell you where it's at, and you better find it. No, recovery is about, how about live a life where I don't mess something up? Because as I move on in recovery, if I have to find all these things in my daily inventory in 10, 11, and 12, and I've consistently messed up day after day, decade after decade, the steps have not worked. The balance that this program is supposed to teach me is to be proactive, think ahead, and not cause any new wreckage of the present, rather than finding cool ways to fix the shit that I mess up. I know it's getting time to go. When people start leaving, I apologize. I do. I truly do. I know I'm past time. It's 10 after. And I apologize because I've gone over, but I tried to tell you that, I'm guilty of this. Before, I've spoken to 9:45 and not a single person stir. I could speak for 3 hours and go through all the steps, and there'd be people that would be here. That's how hungry I was when I realized I was doomed. I was willing to listen to anybody that knew what they were talking about, who would tell me the straight dope, because I'll end with this. I don't know about you. I didn't like my dope cut. And I don't want my fucking recovery cut. Do you feel me? And there's a lot of cut recovery going on. A lot of watered down bullshit. So anyway, I'm going to end with something that I always end with every time I share in a meeting or I speak. And it's important that I say this, because if you notice in the 12th step, it says something. It says if I've had something, I have to say something. And it's not just to hear myself say it. It's so a newcomer can believe it's possible. I've had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, and I'll pass.